Nice to meet you. There are just two of you?
There's
No, there are 5 of us.
Five of you.
Oh, wow.
Here,
Yeah,
maybe.
we have
There
to.
we go.
Yeah, do you wanna? Why don't you sit?
Could we move it back a little?
I don't have to be in.
Yeah, there we go.
Here, you sit there.
Here we go.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, nice.
Is everyone now? You're not visible. Come in a little more.
Okay,
There we
we're
go.
situating ourselves.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Oh, good. Russian American experience.
Yes, that's us.
Can you? How's everything with you?
Very hot, scared of fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's red flag alert. I'm just outside of Los Angeles.
Oh.
And it's been in 100 second day in a row, and there's wind, so we're worried. I have a lot of books here.
Oh,
A lot
God.
of books to burn. Yeah. So Anna, do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, I was wondering if you could tell us about your studio.
Oh.
It looks so amazing. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, there we go. Oh, wow.
It kind of looks like this. That's my desk where I work. Where I'm sitting is where I write. And my old paintings are right behind me. My polar bears are on the walls
Wow.
with very old maps, and then it's just my den.
Yeah. And where are the polar bears from?
I can make up a really cool lie, but I'm not going.
You are a writer. So.
We believe it.
I inherited it from a friend of mine who, in his turn, inherited a Hollywood prop house.
Oh, okay.
And he couldn't run it, and so it went to the auction. But auction does not buy, I guess there's a law in California, does not buy taxidermy and weapons. So I got it all. I got all the taxidermy and all the weapons. And in my house, there are about 30 pieces there. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Do you want to ask your first question?
So maybe the students will start, and I'll round. I'll finish it up.
Okay. We were just wondering,
You
like.
guys want to introduce yourselves?
Okay.
Introduce yourself
Okay.
when you speak. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alyssa.
Hi, Lisa.
I was wondering, what other authors are you friends with, and how do they help you become a better writer? I don't know if you guys all famous writers sit together and do a workshop or something. I don't know, but because I know you started as an illustrator, so I was just curious how other writers influenced you.
Right. Well, being an illustrator, one of the idiosyncrasies of children's publishing is that the illustrator never meets the author. They're kept separately. So the illustrator would get a manuscript and work on it with the editor. And then the editor, depends how much control they want to exert on the publication, either will share it with the author or will not. If the author is very, have a lot of weight, is a famous author, then they would kind of demand in advance to know who the illustrator is going to be. So there's a lot of kind of power play. It's not, when I speak of power play in children's publishing, it's it's nothing. But as a writer, I go often invited to book conferences, like book festivals, and I get to meet other authors that I'm interested in, and we talk. But mostly, to be honest with you, and it's a confession not to be taken out of the room you are in, is that I don't actually read children's literature. Good. I don't really read.
Can you publish that?
Sometimes I would, if there's a lot of buzz about some book, I would certainly check it out just to see what it's like. But my kind of lessons and my interests are in adult fiction, and usually in a kind of older masters, really, like modernists. That's kind of who I read.
Cool.
May I follow up on the question about the power struggle in children's literature? I know that you worked in basically advertisement, right? And then you turned to illustration. And I wonder how children's psychology differ from a consumerist psychology. Is there a difference between a kid and a consumerist?
Right. Well, I think that the kids are different, but salespeople who sell books to children are in advertising. So it's the same really filter that the art has to pass in order to reach its audience, whether they're children or whether they're adults or senior citizens, whatever it is. In between, there is a buffer, and those people are, well, it's just my opinion, right? It's my personal opinion. They try to make it, particularly in our day and age, they try to make it as simple, as simplified as possible. If your opening line does not grab the reader, they will not read the book. It's all the stuff that you hear all the time. I think our culture is sort of in a period of crisis at the moment, and unfortunately, you are the victims of it because you are so young, and really this is what you know. And technology that is helping us to communicate better, also, as I'm sure you've heard many times, also making our communications between us simplify. Just really basic, very simple, and we see it across the board. We see it in our culture and in our politics everywhere. Obviously, for me, that hurts literature because literature is. I just listened to. Do you know who Silverblood? There was Bookworm on PBS. I don't know if they still run this program or not, but there was this man. I don't even know if he's still alive. I hope he is. He would invite authors into the studio and have conversations with them, and very in-depth, intelligent, intellectual conversations. And I heard him speak, and Silverblood said, books are to make your life more difficult. So that would be contrary to the advertising logic. So there is a paradox there, right? So when I make a book, inadvertently what I get from the publishing house is how to make it more palatable to children, how to sell it easier, essentially. Does it make sense?
Yeah. What is then difficult? Is this some kind of emotional intelligence that someone has to process a hard situation in the book, or what kind of difficulty is this?
Well, I don't think emotional intelligence actually plays into it. I think if one is capable of writing a piece of material that is very sophisticated emotionally but simplified formally, I don't think you will have any problem. In fact, you will probably be rewarded for it. It's the complexity of form. It's a complexity of language. It's, I'm no example to anybody, but when we were growing up in the Soviet Russia, we didn't have that choice of children's literature as our children have in the United States. So as a fallback, as what we had to read as children would be 19th century literature. It would be Alexander Dumas, it would be Mark Twain, it would be all these kind of authors that actually wrote fairly, Stevenson, for example. I mean, their language is not simplified. Their language is, their vocabulary is significant. And so we grew up on that. And if I didn't know a word, I would ask my parents. So now I cannot put a word in a book that's too complicated, so they have to look at it. Well, that's silly. Silly.
It's like in Stalinism, by the way, when editors were editing hard words out of the text.
Stalin did the same thing?
Yeah, they did it, yes. It should be readable by everyone.
Interesting.
Right. Well, I mean, there are pleasures and evils of democracy. So when you say that the democratic process is a positive process, yes, I agree, but culturally, not all the time. Sometimes it hurts the product, and I think that what I think the role of literature and literature for children is to for them to try to make an effort, and if they don't make an effort, then they will be either bored, or they just become consumers. They consume this, consume that. Everything becomes like a blur, and nothing stands out. And I want my book to stand out. I want my book to say something that will cause young readers to go to their parents and have a conversation. And this is often what happens with my books, is that parents read those books with children.
Like us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. So my name is Hannah. We really enjoyed reading both Breaking Stalin's Nose and Arkadiy's Goal in this class. And something that I didn't really, I guess, register or metabolize until today when I was thinking about questions to ask you is the fact that you have male protagonists and we see mostly male characters in both these books. And so where are the women and why do you focus mostly on male characters?
Well, for two reasons. One is I write mostly for boys, specifically for boys. I want boys to read. Girls read. If you look at children's literature in general as a whole, if you exclude picture books for very young, but if you look at middle grade and young adult, 90% of the authors are women, and they write from their own experience. And so the girls' readership is quite significant in this country. Not so with boys. It's very difficult to make a boy to read, period, because of so many distractions that they have and hormones and all that kind of stuff. But also because there is not enough literature for them. So from the very beginning, I made a very conscious effort to write specifically for boys. So that was reason number one. Reason number two is I also really write about myself and for myself. So I put myself in a position that is most familiar to me is a kid who's about 10 or 12. I feel comfortable in that sort of, I remember how I felt. And so I can put myself into situations that are critical situations and put a lot of pressure on myself as a character and then see who I am. It's a process of self-discovery. You really write about, the more you write, as you know probably, the more you delve into writing or automatic writing or whatever you call it, those exercises, the more you start seeing actually your intuition, your impulses, because they're not suppressed under certain circumstances. And so I do it artificially in my books because I'm interested in why I left that country and didn't stay and stuff like that, Does it answer your question?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Robert.
Hi, Robert.
And I guess the first question I would be interested in asking would follow up on what you just said. Given this is a course of Russian American literature, how would you interpret your own identity? Just looking past the literature as someone who comes from a Russian background, lives in the U.S., has lived in the U.S. for a long time. Where would you place this identity? Because as we know, that the Russian American community, for example, Anna has been covering this. There are many people, who not only have an identity tied to Russian culture, but already have tied in this identity to the politics of Russia today, so forth. And I have heard that you would prefer not to include the politics. So how would you explain your identity?
Well, I don't mind politics. That's fine.
Yeah.
We can talk about politics if you want. I don't know. I don't know why in the period now 40 years ago or even 50 years ago, why in the Soviet Union appeared dissident movement. It's difficult to explain. There were people who were risking their lives, risking to be killed and tortured and separated from their loved ones in order to tell the truth. Their identity was tied to their culture, to their country. There was something in that culture that was alive for many years, from the very beginning, for hundreds of years, that took the idea of truth very seriously. And some people risk their lives in order to, let alone share it with others, but just to find it out for themselves. Because Soviet Union politics, and as politics before, were kind of shrouded in mystery and secrecy. As I'm learning now in other countries as well, not just Russia. There's a separation between the governing body and the people who they govern that choose not to let certain information be known to the people who elected them. So it's problematic, right? But somehow in Russian identity, whether it's Soviet Union, whether it's Tsarist Russia, whether it's any other country, somehow in that identity there's this incredible respect for truth. And I think that I fall into that category. I also risk my life to much lesser degree. I didn't walk out on Red Square with a poster, but I did read books that were banned. I did seek out foreign students, American students, in order to get some glimpse of truth, of outside truth. We did listen, and I'm sure Anna told you that, we did listen to radio stations that you were not supposed to listen to, like Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, where you get some information, just tiny bits, snippets of truth. And I guess that would be my identity, and that identity manifests itself in the work that I write. I mean, my characters who accept things as they are because they don't know any better are put in a situation when they have no choice but to try to find out what actually happened. And some characters would feel, well, I don't want to know, and just keep on going as before and be safe. and some don't. Some would put themselves on a spot and risk their life and risk everything. And in the case of the Soviet Union, when you put yourself in that position, it's not like you're risking your own life. That would be one thing. But you risk the lives of your entire family and well-being of every relative you ever had, every friend you ever had, especially under Stalin. Right? And so in Breaking Stalin's Nose, when the boy goes to his aunt, she does not take him in. And that happened over and over and over and over again. But also things happen where strangers would take people in. Like during World War II, you would take a Jewish refugee and hide it in your basement. It's just human nature, Some believe in truth and some don't. And it comes to like the simplest things in our everyday lives, things that make you feel uncomfortable. I think what it is, and I'm maybe totally out of my field here, but I think what it is our tolerance to pain. If we cannot tolerate pain, we will live in denial, constant denial. Even if it's on the smallest relationship between friends or your homework at college or whatever that is, or your relationship with family, anything at all. If something causes you pain and you can't tolerate it, you will try